Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel and another monthly wrap-up video. I am now 3 for 3, which is really good. So hopefully that means I am now, in a bit of a rhythm that I can do wrap-ups every month, but I suppose more importantly that I am in a rhythm that I will read a good number of books every single month. And I read some really good books during March. I think some of my favourite books so far this year. Definitely like a couple of them are like contenders for my top books so far. So let's just dive into everything and start off with my trusty old statistics. So during March I read a total of 5 books, which put my yearly total up to 15, and I'm like 30% of the way, nearly 30% of the way through my reading goal. I say that because I am unsure, as I have since read 2 books in April that have changed my statistics a little bit. So I'm not entirely sure. Over the course of the month I read 1,772 pages, and that puts my total at whatever's written up here, again because I've read books since. I don't know what my exact total is for the first 3 months of the year, but that's all here. And my average rating for the month was 4.13 stars. It would have stuck at 4 if I didn't have a 3.5 star rating, but that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I think that is it. So let's actually dive into the books. So first up we have Solitaire by Alice Oseman. This is actually Alice's debut novel, which she wrote well before Heartstopper, which is obviously what I feel like blew her up a little bit, particularly since the Heartstopper Netflix series. This is a YA contemporary. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. This book actually takes place during the timeline of Heartstopper Volume 4, although you definitely don't have to have read any of Heartstopper in order to enjoy this book. In this one we follow Tori Spring. I keep wanting to say Tori Spelling. We definitely don't follow Tori Spelling. We follow Tori Spring, who, if you have read Heartstopper or seen the series, you will be familiar with who Tori is. She is Charlie's older sister, and she is entering her year 11 essentially at Higgs, and in year 11 and 12, or in the final 2 years, again this is UK schooling, I'm just going off how I compare it to Australian schooling, but essentially you can, in your final 2 years of school, you can transfer between the girls' school Higgs or the boys' school Truman. So the upper years are co-ed essentially. Tori is staying at Higgs, but she meets a few people that have transferred from Truman. One is Michael Holden, who has a bit of a reputation from his time at Truman that Tori learns about through Nick and Charlie. But Tori is intrigued by Michael nonetheless, especially because Michael is really determined to be her friend and is sort of just always there. And Tori doesn't really make friends very easily, and she's also struggling to understand why someone who is like happy and upbeat like Michael would want to be friends with her. She also reconnects with her old friend Lucas Ryan, who she used to be best friends with before they went off to high school. Lucas sort of wants to be friends with her again, but Tori doesn't really know how to rekindle that friendship because she's completely different to who she was when they were originally best friends. At the same time, she also discovers the blog solitaire.co.uk, and Solitaire start terrorizing Higgs and the teachers, and Tori sort of isn't really interested in knowing who Solitaire is, but at the same time is intrigued, particularly because Michael is really determined to figure out who Solitaire is, and so she kind of gets dragged into it all, and maybe Solitaire is a little bit more connected to her than she realizes. At the same time, we are following Tori's mental health struggles. She has undiagnosed depression, which she slowly starts to sort of realize that something is wrong and she does need help as we get near to the end of the book. And there are other characters who sort of realize there are things wrong, but for most of the time everyone just thinks she is a typical angsty teenager who is a little bit cynical. Even her parents think that. And it's really sad to sort of see her treated that way when it is obviously clear to you as a reader that there is something seriously wrong. And it's sad that like people really close to her can't really see or understand that and try to offer help rather than just dismissing it. But this was a really enjoyable book. It is quite heavy. Alice has made it really clear that just because you liked and enjoyed Heartstopper doesn't mean this book is necessarily going to be for you. Heartstopper shows a really positive take on mental health problems and getting diagnosed and treatment and management plans, whereas this one is a little bit more heavy, a little bit more darker, not as light and fun as Fluffy, but it is really enjoyable. There is also a long list of trigger warnings for this, and Alice actually does a really good job at listing them all at the front of the book. There is references to suicide and suicide attempts, suicidal ideation, self-harm, depression, eating disorders, and obsessive compulsive behaviors. We get to see Tori's relationship with Charlie, which I really enjoyed because we obviously got to see that a little bit in Heartstopper, so it was really nice to sort of see it from Tori's perspective. And Charlie's mental health struggles also play a really big role in Tori's mental health struggles. So it's really enjoyable. If you were intrigued by Tori in the Heartstopper series, I definitely recommend checking this out if it is something that you think you're going to be able to enjoy with all of those triggers. But I really enjoyed reading Alice's prose because I've only read Heartstopper, which is a graphic novel. And so it was really enjoyable to actually see Alice write such a really great story. And I'm now definitely going to make my way through the rest of her written stuff. Enjoyable. Next up is Paradise Pride by Lise Gold. This is the third and I'm pretty sure final book in the Resort series. I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. It is a sapphic adult romance, and I really enjoyed it. If you guys have seen my previous 2 wrap-ups, you will know that I've read the first 2 books and really flippin' enjoyed this setting, this story, Lisa's writing style. It's just so good. She really knows how to write sapphic romance, and sapphic romance that is just full of all the feelings, all the spoon, all the spice, all the sweetness. And one thing I've found really interesting going through these books is that the first book in this series was completely angst-free, really just fun and sweet, just really enjoyable, loved it. The second book had a little bit of angst, but it was literally solved within like half a page or like a page kind of thing. Not a lot, but, you know, just enough to sort of, you know, whet your appetite kind of thing. This book, however, was filled with a lot of angst, and as much as I enjoyed the angst-free earlier books, I really liked that there was a bit of angst and a typical third act breakup in this one because it fit the characters, it fit the story, and it made sense. All the while still having everything else that I love about this series and about Lisa's books. We follow Megan, who has come to Spain with her best friend who is seeing her long distance boyfriend, and they are staying at the Paradise Hotel. However, they kind of shouldn't be because of this women only Pride event. All of the bookings at the hotel were meant to have been transferred to the sister hotels, but for some reason Megan and her friend's booking wasn't. So they arrive the night before this Pride event to a completely empty hotel, and they're still allowed to stay because they're okay with being there. Megan's friend goes off to see her boyfriend, and Megan heads down to the bar and spends time with bartender Florence. But Megan has some past trauma that makes her feel really uncomfortable and unsafe in the empty hotel, and by being on her own in the hotel. And it's not just being on her own, it's the fact that the hotel is completely empty. So Florence offers to walk her up to her room and eventually offers to stay the night in order to keep her company and make her feel safe. And over the course of the Pride event, these two grow closer together, and Megan ends up having like a lot of fun at this Pride event, essentially being the only straight woman there other than her friend, although her friend is hardly there because she's off with her boyfriend. All the while this is happening and Megan and Florence are getting closer to one another, Megan starts to sort of reflect on her past relationships with men and sort of realizing that maybe she's also into women and that maybe she's not actually straight at all. And so Megan is in her mid-30s, and so this book really focuses on coming out sort of later in life compared to the character Florence, who is only in her 20s, and she's like had her sexuality figured out, you know, for a while now. And so the two embark on a bit of a holiday romance, which is all well and good, except for the fact that Florence had previously been in a relationship with someone who hadn't come out yet, and she didn't really like what that did to her mentally. And so she'd always said that she didn't want to be involved with someone who wasn't out publicly yet. And obviously now she's going through this with Megan, but with Megan it's different because she is really falling hard and fast for her. And so the two are dealing with both the fact that this holiday romance is going to come to an end very soon, and these feelings surrounding Megan figuring out her sexuality and what this means for her and her, you know, the plans that she's had for her future and all this. It was really, really good. It was really enjoyable. Everything I've loved about the previous books in the series. Lise writes the location really well. I literally feel like I've been to Spain 3 times now because of these books. The characters are really interesting and have really great backstories, and they just have so much chemistry that oozes off the page. The spicy stuff is written really well. It's just really flippin' good, and I'm a little bit bummed that this series has come to an end, but really excited now to go back and read more of Lisa's work, but also get excited for what she's working on for her next book. But this was really good. If you are a fan of sapphic romance, this is definitely a book and a series you need to read. Then we have Hartley's Grange by Nicole Hurley-Moore. This is actually the second book in the Violet Falls series, and I didn't realize it was the second book until I was already like into the book and invested in these characters. But in saying that, it didn't really matter that I hadn't read the first book. It just makes me now more keen to go back and read the first book. So I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. This is an Australian rural romance, which is one of my favorite genres, I think. One of my favorite romance genres. It's just, I love it. It's warm, cozy, and familiar because obviously I'm Australian, and I actually have grown up and still live in a small Australian community, and this just has everything that I am familiar with in it and more. So in this book we follow Lily, who is a fashion designer in Melbourne, and her world just suddenly falls apart in one day. One of her colleagues takes credit for one of her designs, and it's kind of the last straw for Lily, and so she quits. And then she finds her boyfriend in bed with another woman who happens to be, I think, a model. He's a photographer and she's one of his models. So she packs up her life in Melbourne for Violet Falls, which is the town that her and her sister grew up in but fled when they were teenagers, and her sister has since moved back and made a life for herself there, and so Lily is going to go back and join her and hopefully figure out her life from sort of reset on her life essentially. Things then go from worse to even from bad to worse when literally on the outskirts of town she has a bit of a bingle with a kangaroo. She's shaken up, that's like the worst thing, and her car is a little bit damaged, and she is saved by her knight in shining armor Finn Hartley, who she's always had a crush on sort of growing up, but knows that he has always seen her as Violet's little sister, and you know, nothing's ever going to eventuate from it. Not only that, Flynn is like the biggest player in the town and wider community. He's pretty much slept his way through the town and the district, and he has major commitment issues. Lily decides to try and make a bit of a go of it in Violet Falls, and she decides to renovate the shop that she inherited from her grandfather and turn it into a little bit of a boutique. And so over the course of a year she embarks on this you know, plan to get her shop set up, and over the course of this year she obviously grows closer to Finn, but is very wary of like his own issues and trauma that he's still trying to face. But he is very determined to show Lily that, you know, he is in it for real, and there's a few little obstacles they have to overcome, and someone may be out to try and sabotage Lily, and it was just really enjoyable. I just love rural romances. As I said, they feel just very warm and comforting. All of these characters and this setting feel so familiar, even though I've never read anything by Nicole before. I've never read about these characters, about this setting, but it's just, rural romance is just so good. And if you are an Australian who loves romance, you definitely need to read rural romance. And I'm keen now to go back and read McKellen's run, which is Lily's sister Violet's story. And also just check out some of Nicole's other books as well. She has been on my radar for a while now, but I've just never got around to actually reading her stuff, and this was just really enjoyable. Then I read Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. This is the first book in the Maple Hills series. This is a new adult sports romance, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. You guys know that sports romance is one of my favorite genres, and Hannah delivered like everything I love about the genre and more. I think one of my favorite things about this book is that both the hero and the heroine heroine are sports stars. I always like when we get a bit of a mix-up in sports romances, because obviously most of the sports romance genre is the hero being the sports player and the heroine sort of having maybe zero interest in sport and like no sporting ability. But I like it when either both of them are sports players and are in the sports world, or I particularly like it when the heroine is the sporty one and the hero is the non-sporty one. But anyway, both of these people, both of our main characters here play sports. Our hero Nate is the captain of the hockey team, while our heroine Anastasia is on the ice skating team. She does like pairs figure skating. And Nate and Stassi's paths cross when the hockey team have to use the ice skaters rink when theirs is damaged. And it is not an ideal situation for either groups, because both of them have big competitions coming up that they need to be able to practice for, but they just have to make it work. Nate, being the captain of the hockey team and very much looking after his team and wanting to make sure everyone is happy and everything is just going well for everyone, is determined to make it work because he sees how stressed it makes Stassi, who is very much wanting to stick to her plan and her goal because of issues that she is still working to overcome. Planning her life is how she can kind of keep in control of everything. And everything is going somewhat swimmingly with this arrangement until Stassi's partner gets injured and can't skate in order to practice before the competition. And they're already in the next level of the competition, and they kind of need to win that competition if Anastasia has any hope of reaching Team USA to go to the Olympics. So Nate steps in and offers to skate with her for practice, and the two have already grown reasonably close up until this point, and this arrangement just makes them grow even closer, and they kind of fall into a relationship, which is something that neither of them were really anticipating, and Stassi in particular never really wanted to do. She's kind of not really a commitment phobe, but she kind of has her sights set on skating and she doesn't really need the distraction. There are other forces at play here that kind of get in the way. They've got some baggage and past trauma that they need to sort of overcome. But overall, this was great. It was swoony and sweet and spicy, and I loved the banter between these two. It was so fun. I also really love the friend group in here because they have some really hilarious banter as well, and there's some really great personalities that come through. So I'm really excited for future books in this series. I will say, the next book, which is Wildfire, coming out in October, I think it is following a character that he's definitely interesting from what we got to see in this book, but he wasn't on my list of like which character would be the next person to get a book. But I'm interested to see what's going to happen there, because that sounds really good. And as I said, the character himself was quite interesting and definitely had like a story that I'm keen to get to the bottom of. But this was really good. I will say, trigger warning for disordered eating and emotional manipulation. But I think Hannah handled it really well in terms of how it was portrayed and how the characters talked about it and dealt with it. And there's also a really positive portrayal of therapy and regular therapy, which I thought was really nice. But yeah, if you love sports romances, if you love hockey romances, like, you have to read this. Like, I am obsessed. Loved it. So good. Want more. Finally, the last book I read during March, and literally closed out the month with it because I finished the majority of it on the 31st because I wanted to have another book read in March, is the Rom-Com Agenda by Jane Denker. This is a new adult, I don't remember how old the characters were, new adult romance. I gave this 3.5 out of 5 stars. Just missed the mark a little bit. So in this we followed Leah, who's grown up in the foster system, and for the past 12 months she has been staying with her last foster care mum as she battled cancer. So this is many years after she's left the system, gone away to school, and then come back because she's found out that she got sick and she wanted to be there for her because no one else was really going to be there to look after her. So she's pretty much spent the last 12 months sort of holed up with Kathy, her foster mum, as she's suffered cancer and sadly passed away. And so now Leah is trying to save up enough money, work a bunch of different jobs in order to move out and get out of town, because she knows that Kathy's son Patrick is going to inevitably sell the house one day, and she's going to need every single cent that she can get her hands on in order to be able to start afresh. She has really no connections to this town other than the woman that she's just buried, essentially, but she soon gets dragged into the life and drama of this guy called Eli and his friends and sister. Eli has been moping about after his girlfriend of 4 months, Victoria, goes overseas to study, and like before she left, he kind of like not proposed but essentially promised himself to her, and she was just kind of like not really into it at the time, and so he's still really heartbroken over this and still thinking that he is going to win her back when she inevitably gets back from Rome, and his friends are getting kind of sick of the fact that he's still moping around months later, and decides that he needs to have a makeover in order to win Victoria back when she does get back, and that means a wardrobe makeover, and also that means a wardrobe makeover, a bit of a personality makeover, and one of the big things that they want him to do is watch a bunch of different rom-coms and films where the hero is exactly sort of who he needs to be, essentially. And Leah gets dragged into this initially because she works at the clothing store where he's getting his first step of the makeover. She is soon like friends with all of these people and developing feelings for Eli, even though he has made it abundantly clear that he wants Victoria back, and he's doing all of this to get her back. But at the same time, he is sort of realizing that maybe he wasn't made for Victoria, and that maybe he doesn't need to change himself for the person he loves. And sort of all his friends have sort of told him this, but kind of just want him to snap out of everything. And Leah is kind of the one that helps him snap out of the rut that he has been in. And everything like that. And I will say I was a little bit apprehensive about the whole like changing yourself for the person you think you're meant to be with, because I don't like that idea, but I did like how it sort of played out in that Eli realizes he doesn't need to change, and sort of becomes quite conflicted about how he feels about Leah, but also how he's meant to be feeling about Victoria. But overall, I really liked how it panned out. I will say, the reason why I did sort of bump down the style rating a little bit was because I struggled with the writing style a little bit, particularly at the beginning as I was trying to get into the characters and get into the setting and the story. At times I felt like Jane didn't really differentiate between all of the different voices and personalities, particularly when we meet Eli with all of his friends, and I struggled to differentiate between all of the friends and who was speaking and sort of what their personalities were and who these people were meant to be. And yeah, at times the writing just got me. And there was other times also when Jane gets quite eloquent in her descriptions for things, which, don't get me wrong, I enjoy. That's really cool that you're able to describe things really beautifully and, you know, not mundane like a lot of other writers would. But it kind of bogged down the flow of the story. Because I feel like those sort of really eloquent, long-winded descriptions work really well for fantasy books, but in romance books they don't really work that well, because I kind of had to go back and read parts of the book again, you know, read some paragraphs here or there, and like sort of just ignore the bit in the middle where it was like overly descriptive for something so really basic and mundane. So yeah, it fell a little flat in some places, but I really enjoyed it overall. I definitely want to check out more of Jane's work, and just sort of see if it was maybe just this book that I was struggling a little bit with. But yeah, overall, it was an enjoyable book, but there were some places that were just you know what I mean? I would say 3.5 isn't a bad rating anyway, but you know, for what I thought this book was going to be, it didn't really hit the mark like I thought it would. So they are all 5 books that I read in March, and you'll be pleased to know that I am already 1.5 books into April. No, I'm already 2.5 books into April, and we're only on the 5th. How cool is that? Go me. If you want to know more about any of these books, both in terms of their synopsis and my thoughts on them, I will link below to my full written reviews of them. That also means I have to actually write a couple of reviews because I haven't done that yet. Anyway, not the point. And And as always, you can find all of my book reviews over on my blog, on Goodreads, on Storygraph. I sometimes use that. And if you guys want to see more of me between video uploads, do follow me on social media, particularly Instagram. That is where I seem to be the most active, and it's where you'll also find most of my bookish updates as well. Let me know if you've read any of these books in the comments below and what your thoughts are on them. And also, if you've read any books that are similar to these ones that you think I will like, please let me know, because I do love book recommendations. I think that is it for this video. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more. I don't know if I'll have another video between now and my next wrap up. Who knows? I might. You never know this. But anyway, I'll see you guys soon, or like next month, with another video. Bye.